بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله سبحان الله تعالى نستعينه ونؤمن به ونستهديه ونستجيره ونستنصره فإنه من هدى الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له اللهم إني أتوكل عليك وأعوذ بك أن أضل أو أضل أو أزل أو أذل أو أظلم أو أظلم أو أجهل أو أستجهل وأقول يا نور السماوات والأرض اللهم اجعل لي نورا اللهم اجعل لي نورا ونصلي ونسلم ونبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. No matter what unfolds on the face of this earth, no matter the distractions, and no matter the extent to which human egoism facilitates and justifies and augments vanities, we remain committed to the truth that everything is from Allah and everything will return to Allah. Among the central narratives of the Quran, one that many Muslims learn and will often repeat is in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, the famous Surah Al Kursi, or what is called as the Surah of the Throne. This short, continuous ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah is a monumental reminder of the truth of our existence, on our relationship to our Maker. The wisest of Muslims is the one who reflects on this, just even the single ayah, Surah Al Kursi, for the amazing amounts of insights it yields into our Maker and what we as Muslims believe. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. Allah, the name chosen by the divine for the divine. Of the name chosen for the one reality outside the natural laws of our existence. It is as if our existence is within a bubble, and that bubble is ruled by the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, by the logic of causation, and by the bounds of time and space. But beyond time and space, what is there? What is there is the singular reality of Allah, the divine maker, the maker that has not been made. Everything within the bounds and the confines of times and space has a cause and has a maker. But simple deductive logic, or inductive logic in this case, would call upon us, remind us consistently that we get hints of existence all the time that is beyond this bubble of time and space. And Allah, la ilaha illa huwa, is not confined by the logic of time and space. We cannot ask, when was God? Because that is a question embedded in time. And we cannot ask, where was God? Because that is a question embedded in space. And everything embedded in time and space is created. Muhdas. And it is only Allah that is a hadas, غير muhdas. Only Allah that is outside the logic of time and space, and so outside the logic of creation. Allah, la ilaha illa huwa. Allah, there is no God but Allah. At so many levels, if there was a God other than Allah, of necessity, they would have to interact with and become intermingled with and interconnected with the logic of time and space. If there was a God other than God, they would have to be interconnected with the logic of time and space. Then it would be possible for us to say, well, where did they come from? How were they created? When were they created? The only way that you can step out of the realm of time and space is if there is a singular reality that is the divine. in Islam, the fact that God is beyond time and space and beyond the logic of the created and creator, meaning the logic that applies to God, is not our own, doesn't mean that this God is not involved, and intimately so, with us. Allah la ilaha illa huwa al-hayy al-qayyum. Al-hayy al-qayyum. This God is hayy. And hayy doesn't necessarily just mean alive in the sense of the way that we live, but is fully aware and intimately alive in the sense that you live. To say that I am alive, but God is not involved with me, is not fully aware of me, is immediately contradicted by Ayat Al Kursi when it tells you that Allah is hayy. Allah is aware, but aware in the sense that you live your life. Fully aware of you, of your affairs, of your feelings, of your emotions, of your struggles, of your problems. Al-Qayyum, Allah reminds us repeatedly in the Quran that the heavens and the earth are not all of existence. They're all of existence that we can be aware of. They're all of existence that we can be aware of. In other words, as-samawat wal-ard, the heavens and the skies and the earth, is the existence that is subject to the laws of creation. But like the world of mulk, like the world in which we dwell, the dimensions of our existence that are subject to time and space, there is also the world of the malakut, a reality that is not subject to the confines of time and space, where the laws of physics do not apply and the laws of biology do not apply. Subhanallah, that only today in our modern age we can read things like what reality would be like in a black hole. And we start saying, wow, in a black hole, time is completely warped. And so even modern, in the same way that modernity has made human beings arrogant and materialistic, in the same way that modernity had secularized the human mind and made it drift away from the divine, but Allah has also given modernity an advantage that previous generations did not have. And among those advantages is that we see glimpses of the truth of what the Quran described to previous generations, but they could not have had a way to even imagine. Previous generations when you tell them it is possible for something to exist without the confines of time and space, where time is warped and space is extremely relative, they didn't necessarily have an example to even think about that. In modernity, we have that blessing. We have that advantage, which relates to something that Ayat Al Kursi itself will point out in an instant. Allah la ilaha illa huwa al-hayy al-qayyum. Allah, the living, al-qayyum, the sustainer of your created reality. Modern science tells us how fragile this reality is. And in fact, modern science tells us that the slightest variation and the entire reality becomes undone. We have the blessing of being able to understand in demonstrative ways what earlier generations could only conceptualize of in non-demonstrative ways. Allah is involved in existence from one moment to another, and without the sustainer and the preserver of this existence, it would collapse. So by the very logic of things, every moment you spend in this existence in which reality does not collapse onto itself, in which the moon remains where it is, and the sun remains where it is, and the earth remains where it is, you owe a debt of gratitude to Allah for that existence. And it is, the more you reflect on that, the more that you realize that Allah's involvement with our existence is complete and total and thorough. No plant, no organism, no living or non-living thing in this creation can fulfill its potential and conserve its purpose without Allah, without God intimately connected to everything. But Allah quickly reminds us, لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. Allah quickly reminds us that while in our mind preserving the heavens and the earth, السماوات والأرض, might seem like an arduous task, it is not for God. Allah is not overcome neither by slumber nor by sleep. Allah does not need to rest, because that is a concept among created things, not a concept fit for creators or for the Creator. But more explicitly than Allah told us directly, له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. Allah directly then reminds us that everything in the heavens and on the earth belongs to Allah. if you think that, if your egos make you think that you are entitled to parts or partials of territory, of property, of borders, then you're deceived. In fact, the one who sustains this creation is also the one that owns all of it. You are but guests in the heavens and in the earth. The ethics that could follow from understanding that we are but guests in what we do not own would produce a revolution in our world. When you cut a tree, when you kill a plant, when you even kill an insect, you are not acting in something that you have sovereignty over. So if you do, you can only do it in Allah's name and with Allah's permission. Because if you don't have Allah's permission, you will answer for it in the hereafter. Can you imagine if we fully internalize this as to everything, the relationships we have, whether we have parents or children or siblings, the homes that we have, the cars we drive, the jobs that we hold. من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم. The logic of things is there is no compulsory power upon Allah. If you are relying on some mediating agent to act on your behalf, then know that there is no mediator that can act on your behalf except according to the laws of God. من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه. بإذنه, you normally translate it as with Allah's permission, but it is per Allah's rules. So yes, this applies to shafa'ah, like the Prophet's intercession on behalf of people, which can only take place with Allah's permission. But it also applies when it comes to dua. Your children doing dua for you, or your parents doing dua for you. That dua has any importance at all only with Allah's permission. But it also applies among those who think that I follow X or I follow Y, I like this person and I follow what this person tells me, and I rely on this relationship to somehow mediate with Allah. Allah very clearly tells you, whatever you rely on, understand that nothing has a compulsory force and a compulsory power over Allah. So the most explicit example of this are those who torture and murder and rob human beings and say, my superior told me to do so, and my boss told me to do so. The shafa'ah of a sinner will avail a sinner nothing. And the shafa'ah of a zalim, a despot, will avail those who obey it nothing. يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُم. The totality, Allah knows what is between their hands and what is behind them. It's a metaphoric expression for everything that is known in the present and that could have been and that was known in the past. Everything that is apparent and everything that is hidden. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. And He knows what is before them and what is behind them, and they encompass nothing of Allah's knowledge save what Allah wills. It is critical that we understand that none of human knowledge progresses without Allah's direct involvement and permission. That is why many scientific discoveries take place, quote unquote, by chance or by accident. You're doing an experiment, a scientific experiment, and then something happens and some type of coincidence leads to a new realization, a new understanding. All advancements in knowledge are stages that Allah regulates and Allah permits, because everything we learn is new to us but was forever known by the Maker. I mean, imagine for how many centuries we lived not knowing about electrons and neutrons and molecules and cells. None of that was news to Allah. And yet, the wise person would study history and the progression of knowledge in human history. And the fact that in an age in which atheism has become acceptable, Allah has also allowed us in that same age to understand things like black holes or realities about the cosmos that could aid those who want to believe, could in fact allow them to see what the Quran was talking about for the first time. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. In fact, Al Kursi, Allah says, Allah's Kursi is wide enough to encompass the heavens and the earth. A Kursi comes from the word Al-Kurs. And Al-Kurs is the ability to do something without exertion. That's why we call a chair a kursi. That's why we say kursi al-arsh, the throne of power. Everything in which gives you, everything in which what is manifested is the power to do something without exertion is called a kursi. Many of commentators on the Quran said a kursi is more like a pedestal of the throne, and they say that because of hadith that we don't need to get into. That وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ, Allah's ability and power encompasses the heavens and the earth, and what you think is a monumental deal, the preservation of billions of stars, the existence of billions of galaxies, or whatever the number is, might be grand in your mind, but in fact, it is of no effect upon Allah. It is not possible for a Muslim to be a Muslim without reflecting upon Ayat Al Kursi. To understand that you are in an existence in which nothing materializes or unfolds or occurs without a purpose, and nothing escapes the knowledge and the notice and the awareness of your Maker. And that in fact, whatever knowledge you will achieve, you achieve with the permission of your Maker. And whatever you remain ignorant of, you remain ignorant of because your Maker has not permitted for that knowledge to unfold. That every step you take, you are stepping in a universe that belongs to its Maker. Every act, with every human being or non-human being, is in light of the full gaze of your Maker. And every word and every action is done in the full view of your Maker. The past unfolded with the full awareness and full view and knowledge of the Maker, and nothing in the present eludes your Maker. To be fully aware of that and to fully internalize that is a healing to the heart. Is a healing to the heart. Because we live at a time that human beings have increasingly been afflicted with the disease of istighna, of being deceived by the mirage of independence and autonomy, and by thinking that the earth is theirs to do with it as they will, and that even in their foolhardiness and their arrogance to think that, well, maybe we can use up the earth and move on to another planet, and we can exploit other planets. We live at a time where family bonds are weak, so we can even enter into a marriage and think we can live in this marriage without considering or without abiding by the rules that Allah set for any such relationship. A child deals with their parents, often arrogantly ignoring what Allah's regulations and rules and ethical commands about the relationship that bonds a child to the parent and a parent to the child. We live in this age in which we have ejected the divine from so much of our lives. And it is very tempting to think that, well, where is the divine? It is very tempting to lose touch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this existence. But Surah Al Kursi, who a lot of people just repeat, or Ayat Al Kursi, who a lot of people repeat as a talisman for protection. You find Muslims repeating it when they travel, or some follow the sunnah of reading it before they go to sleep. But it's not just a surah that is repeated for protection. It is a surah for you to reflect upon. When we say everything begins with Allah and everything ends with Allah, every word of it is true, and Surah Al Kursi is there to remind us of that. As happy or unhappy we might be with the affairs of the world in which we exist, know that it has an owner and it unfolds within the full knowledge of its maker and owner. And your best bet is to turn to this owner and ask the owner to change things if the owner wishes. Your reliance on everything else is a reliance on what is bounded by space and time, and what is bound by the logic of this creation, not by the owner of this creation. Read Ayat Al Kursi and reflect upon it. Let it seep through your heart and your soul, because it can completely transform your very spirit from an anxiety-ridden spirit, from a shaken, disturbed spirit, from a dependent, addicted spirit, to a powerful, flourishing, healthy, beautiful spirit. A single ayah in the Quran. Was'alullah istashhad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi. واتبعوا بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. The Muslim the stronger the faith of a Muslim, the more a Muslim is fully cognizant of the fact that truly everything is from Allah and to Allah. The more that a Muslim responds to Allah in the way that this Muslim relates to the temptations of this earth, your relationship with Allah gives you your sense of dignity. And that sense of dignity comes from the very fact that you are at repose with your Maker. Recently, I was reminded, or I saw an old recording of Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali rahmahullah that was from 1996, shortly before he died. And Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, in all the years, I can tell you, the one thing that he would remind his students of time and again is that a Muslim is a human being with dignity and intelligence. The idea of a Muslim who is not intelligent, and when Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali meant by intelligence, always well read, the idea of an ignorant Muslim and the idea of a humiliated or degraded Muslim made absolutely no sense. And it made no sense because how can you know that Allah is the Hayy and the Qayyum and is ultimately the possessor and owner of all from beginning and end, and in fact that you are just a guest in a very temporary phenomena called life, and be broken or afraid or scared? How can it be? And when we would tell him, but Sheikh, we do live in an oppressive society in Egypt, and we are scared. It is Iman that will either give you the inner courage to overcome your fear, or it is incumbent upon you to migrate to a place and live in a place that allows you to maintain and preserve your dignity. And when I was listening to this taping back from 1996, Sheikh Ghazali was saying that what disturbs him is that so many of the spokespeople on behalf of Islam, he was talking, of course, about his time and the people that surrounded him, were people who lacked intelligence or courage or both. Lacked either knowledge, they're not sophisticated human beings, or they're not brave human beings, or both. And that he often asks or wonders, when will Muslims understand that when Allah reminds us that Allah will only help those who help themselves, and Allah will help establish justice only among those who long for justice. Sheikh Ghazali wondered, when is the affairs of the Muslim world going to transform from a people that understand that when they demand their rights, they are demanding what Allah has endowed and created for them as a matter of entitlement, not as takarrum, not as something that is given to them as a favor by the government or by wealthy people or by powerful people. That the very understanding of what Allah is and what creation is would make a believer fully internalize the idea that the poor and rich are equal, the black and white are equal, the genders are equal. SubhanAllah, I had just finished the bit of nostalgia of watching a taping of Sheikh Ghazali from 1996 and was overcome by the emotions of this old recording of the Sheikh, and I was actually present during that talk, so it brought back a lot of pleasant memories. And on the news, yet again, was the news of 700 Israeli settlers stormed the Aqsa Mosque. And it happened to coincide at the same time that the Arab League, or whatever that useless Arab organization is, was meeting to condemn the Turkish invasion of Syria. Absolutely no reaction by any Muslim country to the nearly now weekly violations of the Aqsa Mosque by Israeli settlers. Back in 1996, I remember that Egyptians used to talk about that planned dam in Ethiopia that Israel and Ethiopia and some Gulf countries are plotting to build, and now it has materialized into a reality. Very much like when you read Palestinian papers from the early 1900s that talk about the planned immigration of Zionists to Palestine, and can you believe they dream of one day ending the Palestinian state, and people, Muslims as usual, say, would deny in reality. Now we all know, because it's not a secret, and the Israelis have made it very public, that they believe the temple was built on the spot, regardless of the historical evidence, and that they demand that the temple be re-established where the Aqsa Mosque is, and we all sit on the side as there are people that dedicate their life, that are committed enough that they immigrate, many of them Americans, but they immigrate to Israel and change their entire life and change the trajectory of their entire existence because they believe in the God of Israel and they believe in, quote-unquote, their historical rights over this territory, and are sufficiently committed to sit there and violate the sanctity of the Aqsa Mosque week after week after week after week. The thing that bothers me the most are American Muslims. Because while I can understand why Egyptians, they're afraid to speak because the government will arrest them and torture them, or Saudi Arabian Muslims are afraid to say anything because immediately the government will arrest them, or etc., etc. Those American Muslims, those American Muslim organizations that for absolutely nothing in return have chosen to sell out all the major issues that concern the Muslim Ummah. They not only sold Palestine and the Aqsa Mosque, they're quiet about Kashmir. They're quiet about the Rohingyas. They're quiet about China. They are quiet, even, not just quiet, but even justified the Muslim ban. So even in something as obvious as the Muslim ban. So you tell me, for you American Muslims, if the Aqsa is not an issue, and Kashmir is not an issue, and the Rohingyas are not an issue, and the Chinese Muslims are not an issue, and even the Muslim ban is not an issue, so what in God's name is your issue? What is your issue then? What do you stand for? Allah استخلفنا في الأرض. Allah has made us the deputies on this earth. And Allah told us, I help you only if you help yourself. And Allah told us, as I've emphasized in so many khutbahs, establish justice. Don't sit around and expect me to somehow miraculously create justice in your midst. Use your intellects and your bodies to create a just society. The problem with American Muslim organizations right now, and I'm not talking about all of them, because of course there's obvious exceptions like CARE, which works very hard to try to protect the rights of Muslims and so on, is that they selectively take parts of what submission is and leave 3/4 of what submission is. They tell you submission is understanding Aqidah and trying to make it to heaven, but they allow themselves to have one response to injustice, and that is sabr, patience. Where we all know how often, how much Allah has emphasized patience. But patience in the persevering as you work to change things. Where in the Quran or anywhere, show me, does it say, sit passively and just wait for things to change, and that's what Allah means by sabr. Didn't we all learn the difference between tawakkul and ittikal? Isn't that something that we are all taught as children? That tawakkul is to rely on Allah and as you work hard to change things, and ittikal is to simply say it's all up to Allah. I'll just sit, do nothing, and wait for Allah to make it happen. Tawakkul and tawakkul both are right, are wrong, are a sin, while ittikal is praiseworthy. Subhanallah, what gives a human being strength and perseverance, speaking for myself, is the reciting Ayat Al Kursi time and time again, as I see the way that Muslims has corrupted the most wonderful religion, to the extent that I often feel this is the best faith in the present age with the worst people. The best faith with the worst people. Wallahu musta'an. اللهم اعف عنا
آمين
واغفر لنا يا رب العالمين
آمين
واهدنا سواء السبيل.
آمين.
Allah, forgive us our excesses and our errors. Allah, empower us to see the truth and to follow your religion and to uphold its commands and its principles and the straight path, Ya Allah.
آمين.
وصلي وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأقم الصلاة.